some people I've met are quite pessimistic about the whole climate change approach. No, they're not deniers, but they're just like they've kind of given up hope on the world thanks to the mess that we're experiencing. And what media is showing as well, it's just not very positive out there. But I just want to share this very important message that there are a lot of very smart, innovative people who are working very hard to fix this.
Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRY. AFRY is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it. Today we have a very interesting story, and let me welcome Sagnik to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you, Mustafa, for having me here. It's a real pleasure to be in your podcast, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. By the way, I was practicing your name so much. I hope I did well now.
Yes, you did. Yes, you got it now.
Great. So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, in general, it's everything. I've been stuck at home as everybody else in Europe has been, and around the world as well, working from home, but getting used to it. But yeah, in general, doing quite well.
Yeah. And where are you now? In which city?
I am in Prague, in the Czech Republic right now. And that's where my company is also based. So, yeah.
And how is the life going? Like, is it still locked down, or what's the situation there?
It's very locked down right now.
Like
yeah, it's. I believe that the Czech Republic was kind of leading in its COVID infection cases because suddenly there was a huge rise, and the government had no choice but to implement lockdown strategies. So right now we have a curfew at night starting from 9 to I think it's 5 or 6, I'm not sure. Okay. And yeah, pretty much we are all ordered to work from home as much as we can, and hence I am at home right now talking to you. So
yeah, I would love to know more about you. So how would you like to introduce yourself, and please tell us what are you passionate about?
Well, okay, I would like to introduce myself as I call myself an urban environmental engineer. This may not be a very traditional tagline. I understand that very well, but there are reasons why I say that, because I'm not quite focused in a particular field. I have urban engineering and environmental engineering come together with a lot of urban planning. And I'm trained as a civil engineer. So I have a bachelor's in civil engineering, and I have a master's in urban environment. So where I have the science of urban environment. And most of my profession today is kind of based on what I've learned in my master's, as well as my work experience later on. So therefore, I call myself an urban environmental engineer. I hope that makes sense now. And
it's very clear now.
Well, now I'm obviously very passionate about the built environment, and I basically came into the whole field of civil engineering, and then environmental engineering, and then urban planning, because I'm very interested to understand and to possibly improve the condition of built environment that we see today on a more futuristic approach. And of course, there is the climate change problem that cities are deeply affected by. And I'm also quite passionate about figuring different strategies on how to help cities mitigate the climate change impacts. This is from a more, let's say, professional approach, and I'm happy to had the opportunity to change that passion into my profession. So yeah, it's all coming from that angle.
Yeah, tell me, Sagnik, tell me, when did everything started? Like, when was the moment when you told yourself, like, this is what I want to work with and spend the rest of my life?
To be honest, it started off in my final year of my bachelor's in civil engineering degree. Final year, I came into civil engineering, I honestly was more passionate about becoming an archaeologist or something like that when I was in high school. So I didn't quite think about this field at all. But what I know now is one of the things that really interested me about ancient history and everything was how human beings change their environment around them to make themselves more comfortable, and that is essentially what we have, what we call the built environment. So I didn't know that at that time when I was in high school. I was thinking, okay, I want to study about ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and
Yeah.
stuff. But unfortunately, when I had to go to college, I discovered that it wasn't the most economic career path. So I was pretty good in maths and science. I did quite well in high school for that. So I decided to choose engineering to be an engineer, and I chose civil engineering kind of subconsciously because I had some kind of an attraction. I honestly didn't know about it at that time,
Yeah.
but it was like, okay, I think that's the way to go, you know? And I didn't really know. Uh, I didn't really discover this about myself until my fourth year, when I remember I attended a conference, a seminar, something like that, in my college, where the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers came and gave a nice talk about what are the responsibilities of a civil engineer, and or at least for the people who are working in this area, and what's the greatest pride of being in this field. And I was deeply inspired by that, and that actually led me to take explore more into this field. So I actually did my bachelor's in civil engineering in India. So I
Yeah.
decided to go abroad to do an internship in a construction company in the Middle East, in Oman, Muscat. And so I went there for a summer internship, and I learned. I mean, the Middle East, or at least that part of the Gulf area, is like the Silicon Valley of civil engineers. You know, they do
Yeah.
all kinds of crazy buildings. The built environment over there is just absolutely out of this planet. You know, so I was really inspired even more by what they are doing over there. And also, I had a chance to visit Dubai, and I saw the Burj Khalifa. And that's like the ultimate. That's like the Great Pyramids of you know. So and so that kind of sparked my inspiration. So I thought I would start working after bachelor's degree, but I decided no, I want to learn a little bit more. I feel that there's a lot more I need to know. And I found the perfect master's program for me in France, in a very good school in France. It's a master's in urban environment. And there, basically, I learned a lot about the deep science behind that's going on in the urban environment, all the dynamics that happen there, and I was really, really inspired by it. So I thought, no, this is it was along the path, but I definitely felt more and more attached to this field as I went along, and after that I came to Prague, and here I am.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So now is the core of this episode, the story of the startup. Tell me about how did everything started?
Okay. Well, it all started a year before I came to Prague after finishing my master's, where at that time there were two founders. One is the main founder, other is the co-founder. And basically, I came in as a third co-founder, and we basically started off because there was this. We felt there was a need to address what was called the brownfield. So like how brownfields in cities impact the urban environment. So basically we were wondering if there was any tool that could actually help calculate this impact of brownfield, not just brownfield, but in general. Then we came across urban heat island effect and like other climate change impact. Like, is there a tool for that? Well, there are tools for that, but not all of them are freely available. At least in a startup level, we definitely need to have these tools accessible. Um, where I studied my master's, the program had connections with the research lab, which was actually developing a tool like that. It's called Solid Microclimate, and it's basically it was built for research purposes, and I knew about it, but I didn't know how to use it and everything. So me and my other co-founder, we decided to bring that here to ECOTEN and start using it for more application-based services that we can provide. So we thought that, okay, well, let's start this company with this tool that we can provide, because this tool is quite unique and it's very complex, and it's very competitive as well. It's very flexible in the way it's used, especially if you know the internal workings of it. So we felt we had that advantage, and with that advantage, we felt that we could potentially work for cities or urban developers to help them redesign their models into more like, to reduce the problem of urban heat island, as we say. And from there, we kind of discovered, okay, so we would work on a very urban, like neighborhood scale, the very small scale. So we would target like architects, urban engineers, urban designers, urban planners, to collaborate with them to provide them with our data. But then we realized that in order to get to that level, we needed to look at the city as a whole, or rather we call it the city scale, in order to identify which areas in the city are the problematic areas where the stakeholders of urban development need to put their focus on. So we started exploring satellite images. We came across the data that is provided by Landsat, particularly Landsat 8, which has a thermal band into it. So that basically allows us to see which areas or experience a rather higher temperatures as compared to its surrounding area. So you can clearly see the urban heat islands. So that's okay. We were like, okay, well, we can also provide this, and this is freely available. And with this map, it's very easy for our stakeholders to understand, okay, these are the areas where you can implement your strategies to make green, all these cooling strategies, what you call blue, green, and white strategies, as we call them. And basically, this was a really cool method. And apart from that, there are a lot of other information that you can get from satellites. It's pretty amazing. For example, you can also get the level of vegetation that's in a particular area in a particular city, which shows how green a city is. Also, the moisture content. These are all important factors. So then the next stage came. Like, I'm just explaining to you how we developed into the state that we are in right now.
Of course.
So the next state is I was just having a very good conversation with a classmate of mine, I remember, and we were just talking about I was just showing her about this heat signature maps, or the heat maps that we call it. And we're like, okay, well, let's check out the city. Well, it looks like the city center is very hot. But if I were to make a mitigation strategy over there, it won't be the most economic thing to do, because not a lot of people actually live there. And that's a very important thing to take. And I didn't actually think about this before, because we're kind of like the science geeks, so we don't really take into account this side of the aspect. We all go through the same weakness. We're all engineers, or at least engineers go through this perspective. So I'm like, hey, I didn't actually think about the people there. And yeah, amongst the people, there are certain groups of people which are particularly more vulnerable to the problem of urban heat island and extreme heat events. Like, okay, well, why don't we take that into account? Let's see how that goes. So luckily, I discovered that most cities have this kind of data for the population and also the age distribution, as well as various other data for as open data, widely available for anybody to use for their analysis. I'm like, okay, let's take a look at some cities. And we took our first case was the city of Milan. We decided to do a little personal research project just to see, like, investigate what it's like. So we had the data from their open data portal. We saw that we can get the different age groups. Most vulnerable age group would be the elderly people, as well as the very, very young people. So let's put them together and let's combine that with the satellite images that we already have. And let's further combine that with a lot of other information that we can get regarding the adaptation or the resilience of a city to extreme heat. And let's see how that works. And we also discovered that the IPCC has a very nice framework for how to assess vulnerability to an impact of climate change.
You should say, what is IPCC for the listeners?
Oh, yeah. It's the Intercontinental Panel for Climate Change. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get mixed up because there's a French version. I forgot about that. It's kind of different. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I stick to IPCC. So, well, in case I can talk a little bit more about the IPCC, it's just basically it's just a panel of experts who come together under the banner of the United Nations to assess the state of climate change in the whole world. So they collect a lot of publications. I basically get a lot of information and produce them to the public for policymakers to implement into their development strategies, as well as they have a lot of modeling that they obtain from various sources, and they're the ones who are responsible for a lot of the climate predictions that are quite popular, and also all the warnings that they give. So they're the ones who are responsible for that, and they're in my opinion, they're one of the best, the most reliable organizations that could produce, that could inform the public about this, in my opinion. Yeah, so basically, they produce reports about the climate change status of the world, and in all of these reports, I've seen that they have a very nice framework of how to calculate, how to assess, how to evaluate vulnerability to a climate change impact, which requires three components. One is exposure, the other is sensitivity, and the final one is adaptive capacity. So exposure is basically how exposed you are, how much you're getting impacted directly from climate change impact. In our case, extreme heat. Sensitivity is basically how reactive the system is to what do you call it? To the climate change impact. And finally, adaptive capacity is what is the capacity of a system to resist change, rather, or to adapt, or you can say. And basically, these three components would define how vulnerable a particular system is. In our case, a city. Anyways, so basically, we could take all these three components, and if we get enough data from open data or from satellite data, we can provide a comprehensive evaluation of the state of vulnerability to extreme heat of the entire city. So this would result into a map which would show you which areas are not only the places where temperature is the highest, but also these are the places where the people are most vulnerable in terms of age groups, and even income levels, and many other factors as well can be taken into account. And finally, which are the areas which have, say, for example, low vegetation, so that it will have low adaptive capacity. It's just based on vegetation, a low moisture content. Maybe the place does not have any proper healthcare facilities, etc. And you can take all that into account, and the map will show you exactly which are the areas which are vulnerable, that are based on all these factors. So it's a multi-dimensional approach to understanding the vulnerability of a city.
Yeah.
And that's basically our company. Yeah. That's what we do, basically.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you target now the decision makers in the municipality or the urban planners and architects? So which group you're focusing on?
Both. See, based on our experience, the urban heat vulnerability mapping, the mapping services that I've talked about, it is more relevant, at least in our experience, to city planners, so the municipalities, and the more micro scale, the neighborhood scale is much more relevant for, say, architects, particular architects, building designers, etc. But we have also received some interest regarding the urban heat vulnerability mapping from real estate agencies as well. So there have been some interest on that in order to assess which areas are vulnerable.
I can imagine. But do you also do you do the analysis? Do you also provide with some kind of solution or proposals?
We provide the very general solutions in that case. Most of us, okay, so we have what we call the blue, green, and white strategy. Blue, green is very well known. We added white because this is an important component of reducing the problem of urban heat island. So blue, I need not say, it's a moisture content of rivers, lakes, fountains, etc. ponds. Green is greenery, green roofs, green walls, trees, rows of trees, green spaces, etc. And white is it basically it's a color of the surface. So the surfaces which have white color tend to absorb more to reflect more sunlight, and so that will help to reduce the problem of urban heat island, because the surface, once it absorbs in the daytime, it will release it in the nighttime, and the nighttime you'll see the urban heat island effect taking place very strongly. So if you so that's what we call the white strategy. And along with that, there are other factors where you can use innovative materials with higher albedos, like the reflectance and everything, and you can also help to reflect off most of the solar radiation with so we'll take that into the white strategy. So the thing is, once we have identified which areas are most vulnerable to extreme heat, we devise blue, green, and white strategies, or you can even call them nature-based solutions for urban design. And we propose design approaches to the stakeholders of urban development. How? Like one of the work that we've done, like a pilot case in Prague, in a neighborhood in a place called Vinohrady. We basically tried to study how the blocks of buildings are impacted by extreme heat, and where you can put what are the optimum locations where you can put the trees, plant the trees in like South Road or North Road, or which are the places where you can put these trees in order to reduce the temperature in a specific location to the maximum extent. And that's very important, because that's where the whole microclimate comes together. The impact of the microclimate, where the wind is going, that's a very important aspect. And how do people perceive temperature? That's something that we can predict using our simulations. And we basically propose design strategies to urban designers and urban planners based on these results that we get from the simulations. And we tell them, okay, putting a tree in this area is a good idea as compared to putting a tree in that area, because you can't just fill up the whole place with trees. That's not economic, you know. Also, it takes a very long time and a lot of space, and not everybody might appreciate it. That's what we came to know. So it's very important to know where you put not just trees, but green roofs, green walls, parks, etc.
Yeah. Do you have a tight communication with urban planners, architects? Do they, how to say, do they get your map and they say, oh, this is so useful, thank you so much? How do they react?
Very positively. For somebody who's technical, it seems to be quite obvious that this is the approach to go. And I was actually quite surprised when I discovered that the enormous positive responses that I have received from urban planners and designers regarding all these methodologies, and they've been very enthusiastic and very supportive. So yeah, I'm grateful to them as well for being that open and enthusiastic. It's what keeps us going.
That's great to hear. What software do you use in order to deliver this map?
The map, well, we have so far used QGIS and ArcGIS, both softwares. We have used some tools that we have created ourselves, like through our own programming abilities, to do some processes of our own. And yeah, but that's basically it. We are using some new softwares, mainly Snap, because Snap is a software that's been released by the ESA, the European Space Agency, to help users exploit data from one of their latest Earth observation satellites. It's called a Sentinel program, part of the Copernicus project. And yeah, we're using that. Super useful. And yeah, so far that's basically the kind of softwares that we use in general.
Yeah, but tell me how big is the team? Because it sounds like there's a huge amount of work behind this maps.
Yeah. Well, we don't have such a big team, actually. We have just 5 people, and we have some like external partners as well who do help us out, especially when it comes to the planning stage, as none of the people in my team are urban planners or urban designers. We're all primarily engineers. So it becomes very single track, like we go too far into it. So we do have support from people who have urban planning background or even environmental backgrounds to help us out. But when it comes to, because we're a startup, and startups usually have a lot of problems with funding. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a startup. It would be a proper big company.
True. Makes sense.
Yeah, we have been working hard on automating a lot of our processes. So I've personally built a lot of tools which have really helped basically reduce, because we had no choice. We had reduced the need for workforce.
Yeah.
And basically let the computer do as much work as it can possibly do. And that's basically how we are providing all our work. So it's like a human to machine collaboration for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
it's an interesting relationship, and then this is what we call also like a part of a smart city, no?
Yes, absolutely. Well, smart city is a very, like, in my experience, I find it a little bit of a confusing concept because nobody really defines it there's no definition of a smart city.
How do you define it? Tell me. I'm interested to know, how do you define a smart city? Or what is a smart city for you?
Okay, that's a tough one because I've heard so many. I need to kind of put them all together.
Yeah.
I think
take your time.
I think smart city is just a city which has a digital platform with a wide range of data that is constantly monitoring the city and gathering a lot of data and making it available for reprocessing, for improving the general urban experience of that city, of experience by the people, as well as for the planning process. That's my definition. That's how I see it. I mean, everything that I've heard, every definitions that I've heard, kind of somehow comes into this one. So it's a platform where you have a lot of data, basically, and that's useful data. That's another thing. A lot of data are not very useful, and a lot of useful data that can be put there are not put there, in my opinion. But I think that that's basically how I would define it.
Yeah, very interesting definition. And I would love to ask you about, like, in ECOTEN, what are the challenges that you're facing now as a startup?
As a startup, well, for starter, since we are working in a domain which is very new and very very dynamic, it's very contemporary. So not a lot of our potential clients know that services like this can be done. The more traditional approach when it comes to, say, climate change mitigation or heat mitigation or any kind of urban development really depends on the traditional approaches that mainly urban planners use, based on the guidelines made by the past. And they don't, many of them are not aware that we can use scientific validation and a lot of data that satellites can provide to help improve the design strategies to help mitigate climate change. Every city is facing it. There's every city promises to do something about it, and they do a lot for it, of course. It's just that with the help of this data that we provide, it would be very efficient. That's what we are trying to tell them. And the thing is, most of them are not aware because there are not a lot of us, to be honest.
Yeah.
So most of them are not aware. And so reaching out to them is a little bit of a challenge, especially when it comes to the public sector, because the public sector is hard to get into. There are levels of hierarchy when it comes to the public sector that we need to address in every single stage. And of course, doing work where we would require them to fund us to provide our services is extremely challenging, especially when it comes to the public sector, because they have the tendering process. Of course, I understand why the tender, it's a public money, so they need to have some accountability, but it's a very slow and boring process that we have to wait sometimes for a year in order to get a very simple project. So that's a challenge. The time, the reach out, rather. We've been focusing a lot on that actually lately. We're trying to go everywhere we can, try to put ourselves forward and make ourselves well known. And that's been working so far, but that's a very key element. So this is a challenge that we are definitely facing, and we are slowly overcoming as well. And with the it's kind of the same with the private sector as well. Many private sector like architects and all, they don't really know that such tools, simulation tools exist, or what they're used for and how they can use it. Yeah, that's another thing, is that they don't know how they can use our data, so we can of course guide them for it. And but it's a lot easier to work with private sector, because you don't have to go through the tendering process. You can just make a contract, or okay, we're good to go. But yeah, it's just they need to know that they need, and they can how they can implement all our work basically.
Yeah.
So that's been a bit of a challenge, yes.
Do you also provide some kind of education or guidance to the municipalities, like giving some kind of lectures in order to open their minds?
Not yet. Because well, we're engineers, so we're very shy to go out there and give a lecture and stuff. So no, but we haven't. That's something that we thought about, especially now during COVID time. But it's a lot easier for shy people like like engineers to put yourself forward just from your house. It's a lot more comfortable there. We haven't done it yet. I have been part of several conferences though. We published a lot of papers, so I'm very well connected with the research community. I read their publications, and I have also published a few papers as well based on my work. And I have presented our work in several conferences, and yeah, that's basically my outreach so far. And there are city planners there, but as a comprehensive training program, we haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yet, exactly. I think it's going to be very useful, especially like now you're doing podcasts and also like inspiring us. And it will be more useful if you do some kinds of, how to say, lectures or video educational material as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Do you see that like the data is something, it's a big challenge for you to gather, because you're like, how to say, your work is based on data. Do you buy it, or?
We have not had a situation where we had to buy it, at least for mapping. Okay. Most of the time, at least when it comes to cities in most of the developed countries in the United States or in Europe primarily, most of the data that we need, which is basically the population data and the age classification population, they are available. They were available for Vienna, they were available for Milan, for London, for Paris. They're available for in the US as well. And this is so far where we have been working. And we have had no problems getting those data so far. And usually, otherwise, the data has been provided to us by our customers. The city municipality usually has access to such data. Every country usually takes data for their whole area, the demographics, etc., about data of the people. It's another question if they release it or not. So when we make a project with them, we ask them, okay, so this is the kind of data we need.
Yeah,
we can get it from the open data if you have it. Otherwise, you would have to provide us with that.
Yeah.
Something to add as well. If the data is not available, there is data that shows the worldwide population distribution. So it's a data that's I think released by the European Commission at ESA, I think, European Space Agency. I think it's a global human settlement population, but it's just showing the population for all over the world. And we have used that data to see which areas of the cities are more populated and are not. What is a drawback of this is that you can't see the age groups. So we have to make a little compromise on that. But that data is available and we can use it for any city. So, but we would, of course, prefer to use open data. It's much more accountable, yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. And tell me, do you focus on Europe or you work worldwide? Where is your market?
Worldwide.
All in, huh?
Yeah, all in, and for good reasons. I mean, because this is a very new market, and if we are to succeed into this new market, we have to take advantage of every situation. And climate change problems, particularly extreme heat, is not a challenge that's located just in a particular area in Europe. It's located everywhere in the world. Sure, it's perceived in a different way, but So there's opportunities everywhere in this regard, and so far we have worked with some cities in Europe and the United States, and we're looking for ways to go into Asia. Primarily, we try to get into the Gulf cities because they can use those cities get really hot over there.
Yeah.
And also China. We are looking at China as a very prospective market for our services. So we are looking for expanding there as well.
Yeah, well, I wish you all the good luck, and I'm so happy to hear your story of the startup, and it's really inspiring.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you are inspired by it.
So if I ask you now like more urban planning questions, more like the nerds.
Sure. But just again, I want to put myself forward. I'm not an urban planner. I have not had the training in urban planning, but yeah, I can tell you based on my experience.
That's why it makes me ask you, because it's going to be interesting to see from your point of view. If you go back in a time machine and you're allowed to change one thing in our cities from the urban planning point of view, what will you change?
Well, what I would change, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I would probably, yeah, okay. So one thing I would definitely put forward is in urban planning, I understand that in the very beginning, urban planning was very expert oriented. So there were like urban planners with a lot of college degrees who are changing the urban areas and everything. And then they realized that it's important to take into account people's perspectives while designing urban cities. I would probably also implement one more element into that, and that is take the scientific perspective as well when it comes to designing cities. I think that's very important. I think that will really help to improve the quality of life for people as well as the city's overall functionality. After all, it's a system, and it would make things much better. And it would it would make the cities more resilient to climate change impacts. If you just take the science behind it, putting the trees in the right place just makes it better for the overall experience. So I think that's what I would do. And I think that was lacking before and kind of is still lacking right now. But a few examples of cities that have adapted to this, where they've put the scientific, they've taken the importance, they've understood the importance of the scientific perspective, have really benefited from this. I think an example of that would be the city where I studied in Nantes in France, which was known as the green capital of Europe in 2003, if I'm not sure about the year, but at some point it was. And they have the authorities there have taken, and it's very clear how green it is. And the tool that I used was actually developed in Nantes, so that's a big that's a big deal over there. So they are working a lot with it, and I know that the cities are collaborating with the researchers, and they're really taking into account the science, and therefore it has become one of the most, I think, my personal opinion, one of the most livable places in Europe and possibly the world. So
that's awesome. I never been there actually. I should go.
I recommend you. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, a very interesting reflection. And what if you go to the future, like let's say 100 years, and you're allowed to add one thing to our cities? What will you add in all the cities?
In all the cities. Okay, I can get a bit wild in this because I'm a futurist, so I please excuse me if I deviate from you might think I'm a little insane, but the skyscrapers that we are seeing today, because they're not necessarily the most effective. I mean, in my opinion, again, they're not the most effective places to live, or even sometimes places to work. Okay, I can understand to a certain extent you need to, like, cities that are becoming more and more populated, like. Today, already at present, more than half of humanity is living in cities today. That's about to project itself to 65, and I think in a very late future it will be close to 80 to 90%. And that would mean the cities would expand, they would take over its surrounding areas. Either they can expand on the side or they can expand up. I think you can also expand down, actually. I think so. It's something also I kind of take inspiration from Elon Musk over there, but I do think that's a really that's a really good idea, and it could potentially be available I have not taken into account the cost of it. Again, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
it's one of the crazy ideas. What I do see is like a big data portal, a data portal monitored by artificial intelligence to make sense out of this huge amount of data that is successfully being collected by possibly machines, because they do an excellent job in that, and also processed by machines, and then of course implemented by humans. That's the kind of thing that I see for the future. It's I mean, I cannot stress how impressive impressive work the machines can do if you put them in the right place. I mean, that's something I'm using for my own work
yeah,
currently. It's really, really helping out. So
yeah. Super,
so that's
super
my
interesting.
opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna be
that's my
super interesting.
perspective. I'm a bit
And
of a futurist. I grew up with Star Trek and stuff, so
but
Star Wars and stuff.
but
So yeah.
this is actually this is what we need. We need like a new ideas, and you need inspiration in order to design better cities. So again, thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your story with us.
May I also add one other thing?
Yeah.
Is I'm also somewhat of an advocate of very good public transport system. So in Prague, for example, public transport is fantastic. It's one of the best that I've ever seen, actually. So it's I think that that has a very deep impact on people's lives, because I'm never worried about going from A to B, because I'll figure it out, no worries. But I know that not a lot of cities actually share this luxury. People living in cities, it's a hassle for them to go from here and there. So effective public transport using modern technology and fast, rapid public transport is a very, very big deal, and I see that in the future coming
Yeah.
up. Of course, greening of cities and everything.
Yeah.
I need not say that should not be future. That should be present. That's why I'm not
I
mentioning
love
anything
this.
about
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
I love that. I
yeah.
love that.
I think that should be the present. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So thank you so much again for giving your time to record the episode. I would love to hear from you three takeaway messages to all the listeners that you summarize, like your reflections and ideas.
Okay. Well, there was one thing that I say to people who are trying to kind of find out what they really like. Some people I've met are quite pessimistic about the whole climate change approach. No, they're not deniers, but they're just like they've kind of given up hope on the world thanks to the mess that we're experiencing. And what media is showing as well, it's just not very positive out there. But I just want to share this very important message, that there are a lot of very smart, innovative people who are working very hard to fix this climate problem. In my personal experience, I've been to many expos and I've seen some of the amazing work that they're doing. So I would just tell them to not lose hope. And forget about losing hope. In fact, you should be a part of it, because this is a field. This whole innovation. This is a very valuable. This is a very upcoming and a very necessary field for anybody who's like graduating. I'm trying to address those people who are trying to find their career, and so it's a very necessary path to go to. And you're welcome to the club. Seriously, we need you. We need you all. That's a message. Other than that, for city planners and urban developers, oh boy, um, I would say that public-private partnership isn't such a bad thing, and we shouldn't be too scared of working with us. I mean, us in private sector. I know some cities which have not been are not used to working with the public-private partnership, but just think about the fact that like if you diversify and branch out and give work specific work to certain private sectors which are specialized in that area. And I'm not just speaking about me, I'm speaking about us, or like in general. There are many other companies that are working on solar panels and renewable energy and stuff, and they're experts in it. They know how to do their stuff. If you could collaborate and make the collaboration in a very easy way, I think there's benefits in every side of that, and ultimate beneficiaries would be the citizens. I think the best example was our, if I may say, the experience that we had in Vienna, where we actually produced the first map for the city, and the city actually released the map in a press conference. And neither, this was, I think, at least, I don't know from their perspective, but this is our first private-public partnership. And once they released it, the response was both shocking for us and them, because they had no idea. Once they released the map, the people started like saying, okay, wow, this map really shows that my neighborhood is in a very problematic neighborhood. What are you going to do about it? This wouldn't have happened otherwise. I mean, and it's really incredible how this happened. And this prompted the city to take more actions. And today we have this 23 Cool Street Plus project, which is designed to improve the condition of the city in terms of heat mitigation. So I think that's a very good approach, and I think it would be helpful for the citizens and ultimately improve quality of life. And well, this is an example of public-private partnership. I think it's a good thing. So that's my message to them. We're here to help.
So. Exactly. And I think I of course believe that we need new ways of thinking, new models of co-planning the cities and so on. Again, big thanks to you, and hopefully see you again in more interesting episodes. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, and good luck with all your other podcasts. I really enjoy listening to them.
Thank you. I need 3 hashtags from you to the episode.
For today's episode, climate proofing would be one, because that's kind of our logo as well. Blue, green, and white strategy, and heat resilience.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.